Double Back with Kenty Mac.
Welcome to the newest gymnastics podcast, Double Back with Kenty Mac. Each week, I'll watch a meet and discuss it with a friend. This week, please welcome my friend Steve.
Hi everybody. It's good.
Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I know we've been talking about gymnastics for so long, so this is just like the most exciting thing because I know nothing about gymnastics except how to watch it on TV or go with you and watch it in person.
I was going to ask, is this your first women's college meet that you've ever watched?
Didn't we? No, I think we actually went with you, right, to West Point to go watch some gymnastics there. So this is the second college gymnastics that I've seen. That I'm sure, you know, when I was a kid, I used to watch it growing up in the Olympics. But I'm not watching. Is it Winter Olympics is gymnastics? Yeah, right?
No, the winter that's going on right now, figure skating, luge, right. All that.
Yeah. So in that case, no, I haven't seen it in a very long time, in a long time.
And of course, the Summer Olympics was just last summer because of the COVID and the schedule and the whole thing. So
pandemic. But I was happy to see everybody back. Everybody was wearing masks there and they do their little thing and then immediately put their mask back on. So good for them.
Yes, good, nice protocols at Ohio State and Minnesota. So bravo to these two schools and the crowd. I thought the crowd did a nice job, but mostly saw people wearing masks.
Yeah. It was great.
So just to help the people understand, we've been friends for more than 7 years.
Right.
Like you mentioned, we've gone to a few gymnastics meets together and we love talking about it. So thought this would be fun to watch a women's college meet and catch up on it. But first of all, you just got back from a little trip. Can you tell me how was your trip? How everything go?
Yeah, so me and my husband Lane, who Kent, Patrick, and Lane and I have been friends for 7 years, but Lane and Kent have actually been friends for probably 20 years. So we went to Puerto Vallarta and we were there for 8 days. It was 2 days to get there and about a day and a half to get back because of the snow and the winter and COVID. There was lots of canceled flights, lots of rebooked flights that were then canceled, that were then delayed, that were then canceled again. So the traveling wasn't easy, but the actual part of being there was great. We got several massages, we hung up by the pool, but happy to be back, but not happy to be back in this wintry tundra after having beautiful 80-degree weather, sunny, no rain every single day for 8 days.
8 days of sun sounds ideal. Yeah, we got another 4 inches of snow last night here in upstate New York.
Yeah, woke up to it. I have a dog, a new dog. Her name is Nella, and she woke me up at 5:30 this morning to take her outside. And waking up to snow after going to bed to 50-degree weather was not exciting.
I bet. So this is not your first podcast experience. Can you tell the people about your other podcast background?
Sure. So I'm on the co-host of a other podcast called the Adam Sank Show, a gay take on Howard Stern. We do pop culture, we do gay news. We usually have a special guest on every episode, whether that's a comedian or some sort of adult film star or movies that apply to the gay genre. Very gay centric, but it's a lot of fun. And you can find that anywhere you can download podcasts. And we are live every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Very fun. Well, thank you for thank you for coming on our little podcast. We're happy to have you.
Happy to be on.
And last night we were able to watch Ohio State at Minnesota. This is a fun meet. I love watching Minnesota. Of course, they're such stars. And these were two teams that I hadn't sort of watched and talked about this season. I'm wearing my Ohio State gymnastics shirt. I was able to go to a meet live in person a few years ago in Ohio State, and I bought this there. So I wore this to cheer on the Buckeyes. My husband is from Ohio originally too, so that's the other tie-in there. So before we get
that I went to school in Ohio.
Where did you go?
I went to Otterbein, which is 10 minutes north of OSU. So even though I didn't go to OSU, I feel a little bit of an attachment because it is Columbus. So it was kind of fun to be like, oh, I totally know Ohio State because I was there, sort of.
And all the yard signs in the neighborhood probably all had OSU on them.
Oh my God, it's too much. It still is too much. It's a little culty, but I mean, it's a great school.
It reminded me very much of my childhood in Alabama, where everyone's yard signs have University of Alabama on them,
Right.
even if they didn't attend the college. So, so this was a fun meet for us to watch. But before we jump in rotation by rotation, was there anything that stood out to you about the telecast or the meet itself? Or should we just jump into the first rotation?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was actually, I didn't realize it was going to be almost 2 hours. I thought they were quick meets, like an hour. So that was the first thing. But I didn't realize how fast it goes. I was actually really enjoying watching it. And they move it along so fast. And one of the diamonds in the rough was our newscaster, Jade. She definitely stuck out. I know that we were there to watch gymnastics, but she was a lot of fun to watch. And I know you and I were texting back and forth, just enjoying her on-air presence, which was a lot of fun to watch. So shout out to Jade if you're listening and watching this little podcast.
That's right. Jade Morissette, one of the stars of the meet. She introduced the meet and then introduced us to the commentators, who were two alums of the Gopher Minnesota gymnastics program. But she really kind of opened the show, and she popped back in a few times throughout the meet, and I'm sure we'll enjoy checking in with Jade as we go.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
The first thing I noticed before the first rotation started, the Minnesota team did their little huddle up to encourage each other and really get the school spirit going. And I thought that was very sweet. And their coach, Jenny Hansen, you may not have noticed which one she was, but she was...
was she in the white?
She was on the side as the huddle up was going. Okay. She is no nonsense. I love seeing her because she doesn't play any kind of games. She is there with a mission. And I enjoyed seeing her intensity.
Yeah. Actually, that's funny that you talk about that huddle up. I realized it's such a great community that they build, because you don't see that when you watch it on, the Olympics, but they're all there. They're all kind of doing the choreography together along with them. And then after, regardless of whether it was a great, set or a horrible, is it called a set? Actually, that's a good question.
Routine. Yeah.
Routine. After they were done with their routine, they would all be right there, good or bad, like hugging and high-fiving and cheering. And it was just kind of like a really nice camaraderie that I didn't think would have such a big presence in such an individual sport.
Yeah, totally. I'm glad you saw that. The other thing I noticed is every time they would show the crowd, so much of the crowd was wearing Minnesota sweatshirts or Minnesota colors. I saw one person with some Minnesota gloves on or mittens that looked really comfortable. My hands were cold last night and I wanted some of those Minnesota gloves. So I'm going to have to go to a meet there and buy some of those.
Right? Just to keep your hands warm for
That's
every
right.
meet that we go to in this cold, horrible winter.
Exactly.
And the uniforms were also super unique. And I think it was, Ohio State was in white. So I think Ohio State was the one that they all had the tiny little bows in their hair, and they all had the same hairdo. I didn't notice that much in Minnesota, but Ohio State, they definitely had a really kind of interesting, pretty outfit, or what do you call it? Uniform. That was something else that I didn't notice before, but it was kind of great to see.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like when a team wears white, that's really that's a statement right there.
Yeah.
Anytime you hear from a gymnast, back from their competitive days, anytime they wore a white leotard, they felt kind of the most, my six-pack's got to be right and everything's got to be right on because I'm wearing my white Leo. So I thought,
I didn't know that was a thing.
That was a statement from Ohio State to wear those white Leos, but they looked great. Minnesota had their kind of reddish color with some ruching up top. A very pretty Leo. They both looked great. And I agree, the sort of the top buns on the Ohio State athletes, a lot of them had that top bun.
Yeah.
Gave them a bit of a symmetrical look for some of them.
The Midwestern poof.
The poof. It's like the bump, but the Midwestern version.
Exactly.
So in the first rotation, Minnesota was on the vault and Ohio State was on the bars. Another hero of the meet, might have been the camera guys who couldn't get things figured out at the top of the first rotation, but I'll give it to them that they got it sorted out as we move through the meet.
I think that's something exciting to watch about college, right? Because you get college announcers, college camera guys. I mean, I think it's just the judges are the only ones that aren't. I'm sure they're involved in college somehow. You probably know more than me, but it seems like everyone, aside from the actual college athletes, are still learning their way around how to work stuff. So if anything, not that it's comical and certainly not making fun of them, but it's fun and interesting to see people learn as we go. And especially, like you said, the camera guy, as the meet was progressing, you saw them getting more comfortable with the camera, or our friend Jade getting more comfortable being the announcer for the day. So it's fun. To me, I was kind of enjoying all the aspects, not just what was going on in front of you, but also what was going on backstage.
Yeah, and you're right. The judges are professionals. They are paid and brought in to do the judging of the meet. But many of the other people were either college, volunteers, students. So, we didn't see the first vault. We missed another vault later in the meet. Right. The first bars routine, we were kind of not focused on the athlete. So it was a little tough just to catch what was happening at the very top of the rotation. But I think we were able to see some highlights later on. Right. Who was one of your favorite vaults from Minnesota?
I think, let's see, from Minnesota, I think my favorite there, I had two. It was definitely Lexi. She's crazy good. And then, but Lexi, I mean, she stood out, not just in the vault, but like everything that she did. She was so great. I mean, she just did it. What was it? One thing that I noticed is they go so fast. And then, they finish. And I just wrote this down. What I didn't realize is that so many of them, I think it was more Minneapolis than Ohio State, stepped out from it instead of like sticking it. I don't remember if she did or didn't on her vault.
Yeah, so Lexi Ramler, she did that 1.5 where she ended up facing away from the vault. She had a small hop forward when she landed.
Yeah. And what happens if there's a small hop forward? Is that a deduction, or are they allowed to hop forward?
Yeah, a small hop like that is going to be 0.5 or 1/10. If it's a bigger step, we saw a couple of them take even larger steps. Those are going to be a little bit higher, maybe 1/10
So actually, that's great. Can you help me understand scoring? Because I feel like everyone was in the 9s, right? So is there ever like an 8 or a 7, or is everything judged by like a half of a 10? Like I'm looking at the score sheet now, and I'm trying to figure out, well, how do they actually score if everyone's just automatically a 9 and then they just, So can you help me understand maybe what the scoring is like and what it all means?
Yeah, sure. Good question. So if the athlete completes all of the required elements, they're judged out of a 9-4. So then the rest of the points, you have to get bonus points. So that's an additional element of difficulty or additional combinations of difficult elements. So for the most part, you're going to see everyone judged out of a 10. The one exception is vault. A lot of the Ohio State team, for instance, did the Yurchenko full, where they just do the full twist and land facing the horse. That's judged out of 9.95. And many of the Minnesota athletes did the Yurchenko 1.5. I think they had 4 of them. So that's judged out of a 10. But you're right. The scores do tend to be bunched in that 9-7 to 10 range, which does create some problems. It's hard to separate the great from the very great when all the scores are very, very close like that. You won't see an 8 or something lower than 9 unless someone has had a fall or missed a great number of elements in their routine so that they weren't then judged out of 10.
Got it. So then, like I said, the Yurchenko, just for completing it, their base is 9, what'd you say, 9.6?
9.95 if they do the Yurchenko full. Yeah.
Just to do the Yurchenko full, and then any imperfection is deducted from that.
That's right.
So then how do you get above the 9.95? Or is there...
So if you do the Yurchenko full, that's the highest you can go. If you do it absolutely perfectly, you'll get the 9.95. So then you can upgrade and do a more difficult vault. So the Yurchenko 1.5, the Yurchenko double, those would be scored out of a 10, like Lexi's vault.
Yeah.
That's a 10-0 value vault. She had that small hop forward and she ended with the 9.875. So they took 1.25 tenths for the slight imperfections. I thought her knees were a little soft. That's what they call it when maybe you're not completely stretched straight throughout the whole flip. I thought I saw her knees bend a little bit. So I think it's the bend of the knees and the hop added up to bring her down to 9.875.
Cool. And then you talked about like if they meet the requirements. So what are the requirements that they have to meet to get that base score?
Very good question. So it's slightly different on each event. For instance, on floor, they're required to do at least 2 tumbling passes. They have to do a tumbling pass that has a forward salto in it, a tumbling pass that has a backward salto in it. Several leaps and combinations of leaps are required on floor. On the beam, there's a certain number of tumbling elements, a full turn, a certain number of leaps, and a dismount of a certain level that are required. On the uneven bars, you have to have a release move. You have to transfer from the high bar to the low bar. So there's a little list on each event of the things that you have to do. And so you'll see as you go through, oh, that's what that athlete's choosing to use as the release move on bars. This is the dismount that this person's doing. And it doesn't seem as difficult as the other one, but there were other elements of difficulty throughout the routine that got them up to that 10-0 start value.
Oh, got it. Okay. So it's almost like they're having an exam, it seems like this is what they're being judged on. And, you know, let's use 100%, right? You get 100%, which in this case will be a 10.0. And then if you get them all right, you get the 100%. If not, you get the deduction. I get it. Okay.
Exactly. And as you get to know the requirements on each routine, for instance, on beam, I'll kind of watch a routine and think, okay, that's the tumbling combination. Then they'll keep going. Okay, that's their leap combination. And I know that they still need to do their, download of the beam skill. And I know that they still need to do their full turn. So you can kind of tick them off as you go. The more you watch and you get familiar with the different requirements.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Got it. So I just need to watch more.
But I agree with you. Lexi is a standout everywhere. She's so terrific. The other one who I thought was such a standout on the vault, Anna Loper. Now talk about sticking a vault. She landed totally upright. I thought her legs were straight the whole time, didn't move at all. Really fantastic job.
She was the super strong one, right? Like she threw and then she was like completely straight in the air. I mean, she didn't appear that muscular, I should say, in her frame and body type. And then I remember she just stuck it so hard. I was thinking, oh my God, she got a huge cheer at the end of that one too, didn't she?
She got a 9.975. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I noticed that was the first replay on the telecast. They hadn't gone back and shown us any replays until Anna stuck that vault. And then they said, we're showing that one again.
Right. Exactly. Oh my gosh. And then I'm trying to think. So how do people train for these sort of things? Do you know, or like what is it just part, like I know once they get to college, is this considered professional level, I'd assume?
So most of these athletes have been training in gymnastics since they were probably between 5 and 8 is when you normally hear that people have started gymnastics. So by the time they're 17 or 18 and they've gone off to college, they've been training 12 years perhaps. So many of the athletes already have mastered the skills that they do in college.
Yeah.
If they were elite competitors, like Lexi Ramler, for instance, competed on the US national team, she was an elite competitor.
Oh.
They are able to do less difficulty in college and still meet all of the requirements for the 10.0. So when an athlete like that gets to college, it's about doing less difficulty, but doing it as perfectly as they possibly can.
Got it. Okay, cool. So then is Anna one of those people that was in like, what do you call it, elite, or she gets to do the more fun stuff because she's not elite?
That's actually interesting that you would ask. Anna Loper never did do the elite. She did what they call the Junior Olympic. She was a JO competitor for her career. So she did the JO Nationals. That's called level 10. So kind of a different system than the people who
Okay.
go to the national championships or the world championships or the Olympics. So she was a big star in that system and has now come to be a big star in college. Many of the
Yeah.
athletes who do the JO system, they are not doing quite as intense of a level of difficulty as the elite athletes. So that is a difference that you might see if you watch the Olympics or the national championships. You're going to see much more difficult skills.
Yeah.
And when you watch college, what you're going to see is perhaps a slightly lower level of difficulty, but absolutely done to perfection.
Oh,
Because they've kept that 10-0 system, it's all about how close can you get to perfection on each routine,
oh, cool. So
which
then
is
the
another
10,
reason that you probably see that all the scores are kind of
yeah,
bunched right in together.
yeah. That's what I'm looking at. I mean, I don't think there's any eights.
Yeah, I think there
Um,
were a couple of, I think there were a few falls last night, and those were the
yeah,
scores that you can see are really much lower. But
yeah.
obviously, in terms of the final team score, this one came down to about 2 points. Sometimes the meets come down to a few tenths of a point. It's really about 1 through 6 in your lineup. How close can you get to those perfect routines?
Wow. Cool.
So moving over to Ohio State on the bars, was there anyone who really stood out to you there?
Lexi Edwards was great. So I remember when she was going from the low bar to the high bar, it was so smooth. It almost looked like she was floating. And it was like, that's what got me to like pay attention more because of the smoothness. And then even when she did the is it called a jump or a leap off the high bar into her landing?
So her dismount, yeah.
Her dismount, when she was doing her dismount, it was just so pretty. It was almost in slow motion, the way that she controlled her body. She totally stuck out. I just thought it was great.
Yeah, I agree. She did that Maloney to pack. Those are 2 release moves in between the bars. And she's so strong and coordinated that they just look very smooth, like she's
Yeah.
flying. Really
What are the
nice.
heights on those two bars?
So the high bar is about between 7 and 8 feet off the floor. And the low
Okay.
bar is between about 5 and 6 feet off the floor. So that's why
Oh,
when they're swinging, with their arms extended, they can really just swing all the way through. They can raise the bar if there's a taller athlete.
okay.
That's a rule that's been put in place in the last few years. If someone's taller and their feet might scrape the mat, they can raise that bar. But for the most part, that's where the height is set.
That's what I was wondering, because especially when I was watching Lexi do it, I was trying to think like, does she have to watch the way she bends her foot, or is that why they go into that tuck so that they don't hit anything? Because I wasn't sure of the height. And don't hate me, is there a height difference between, or a spacing difference between the low bar and the high? Is that a standard thing, or do they move it based on height?
Yeah, so the bars are about 6 feet apart. So what you'll see when they go for their giant swings, they can't stay completely stretched out with their
Yeah.
arms stretched out. They'll either straddle their legs or pike their legs, or sometimes they'll even arch their back to do that swing in between the bars.
Yeah. Because again, I was watching Lexus and I was thinking, they probably have to, I mean, I'm sure they are completely spatial aware, that I could just imagine either them hitting, like that part of where your foot meets your leg, or when they're swinging so hard, just thinking, oh my God, that must hurt if they ever.
Sometimes you do see people who clip a heel or hit the low bar as they're swinging by, and that can be very distracting during the routine. But they certainly
Yeah.
train to clear the bar every time.
Yeah. So, but watching her was definitely such a treat, because it just didn't look real at all, at least to me.
Yeah, I thought another one of the standouts on Ohio State was Colby Miller. She was toward
Okay.
the end of the lineup. She did that Maloney from low to high, and then the bail where she landed right in the handstand on the low bar, and then wound up for a big double layout dismount, which she
Oh,
totally stuck cold.
yeah. And then she did a few like twists and turns in the air, and she got a playback too, didn't she? Where they showed the slow motion of what she was doing.
I think they showed her double layout stuck.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was. I mean, she was great. and another one, and she seems really tall too, if I remember her correctly. Like it just her sort of at least her dismount from the high bar and and sticking it. One, she stuck. She didn't step out of it, right?
That's right.
So she just stuck it, but she did it so fast and so cleanly. Yeah, it just seems so cool. It would be fun to watch in person instead of just on TV.
And then a shout out to the Ohio State Bar Queens. In trading pool last week, I picked up Stephanie Berger and Nicole Riccardi, and they got 9875s last week, and they got a 985 and a 9775 this week. So those two are two other very strong athletes on the bars for Ohio State. Ohio State ended with a 48-9 on the uneven bars. So that's a very solid score.
Yeah.
Many of the teams that are looking to make regionals, they're looking to be better than that 49 on each event. So Ohio State was right there. Minnesota finished at 49.25 on the vault. So you could see there that their 4 10-0 vaults and the excellence that they competed them at, that really put them ahead of Ohio State after the first rotation.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking at their scores now.
I thought that some of the Ohio State, the early routines were scored a little bit lower than I expected. For instance, I agree. I thought Lexi Edwards did an excellent job. She did have a hop on her dismount, but she scored a 9.65. I thought that was a little bit low for that routine. And then, of course, they had a fall in their lineup. So that tends to stop the momentum. They then had to kind of build back up to those 985s toward the end of the lineup.
Right. And I think that the other two commentators were talking about it, saying like once there's a fall or once there's, some sort of big mistake, that it's up to the rest of the team to bring them back up, because I guess their sort of energy falls along with them. So it was interesting because someone came, I don't remember who it was afterwards, that like really stuck the routine. And the commentators were saying, now that's what we need to get the team back up and get moving. And then you see the team rally around them once they're done with their routine. So it was great to see, but I don't quite remember who it was. And interesting that you said that they were scoring low, because at the start of the meet, I thought that Ohio State was doing so much better than Minnesota. So I was surprised to see at the end that Minnesota's the one that won and Ohio State didn't.
Yeah, you texted me that. You said, OSU is killing it. And I was curious because I had been watching the scores. What was it about, obviously being a more casual gymnastics fan, right? What was it about their performance that you felt like they were ahead after the first couple of rotations?
I just thought that they were performing a lot cleaner. Like to me, on the untrained eye, it seemed like they weren't stepping out, they weren't hopping in front, that a lot of them were just seemed like everything was happening a lot cleaner and smoother in comparison to Minnesota. So I guess I'm looking to you and your trained expertise in this field. Like, what was I missing that I thought Ohio State was doing so much better, but in reality it was Minnesota was doing better?
Yeah, no, and I was just as mesmerized as you when you said that, because I thought, I was trying to think, what is it that, I know that when we get to the second rotation, Ohio State was sticking a lot of their vaults. And they were doing the Yurchenko full, which does have the lower value, but there were a lot of them that they weren't moving on. And I could see when you're seeing the Yurchenko full and a half with some hops or some steps, and then you're seeing the other team come in and stick a bunch of Yurchenko fulls, I could see how you would think that, there's a differential there.
Yeah.
And so part of it is, I think the deductions are coming from things that maybe you don't immediately notice. Either some of the Ohio State athletes might have been getting deductions during their routines. Some of the releases weren't caught in the right position. Some of the handstands didn't make it all the way up to vertical. And those are deductions as well, but they're not as obvious as that stuck dismount or with those high, the one high release that you really notice. That's maybe what stands out to you more.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially we were talking about I guess in my untrained eye is I just didn't know. But like you
Well,
said, it's about the requirement that they were hitting. They were hitting the lower requirement where Minnesota was hitting a higher requirement, which I just learned today is why they scored high.
well, and it's an interesting point to think about, and it's an interesting quandary for gymnastics. How can we make gymnastics more clear to fans who maybe don't know all of the skills or all of the requirements? How can we make it more clear why one team is ahead of another one?
Right.
One thing that's been discussed a lot is the way that figure skating lists on the screen every time they do an element. You see the value of the element and the credit that they got, either deductions on the element or extra credit on the element. Perhaps something like that could help viewers to see if there's a much more difficult routine, or if there's a routine that's full of deductions because of missed handstands, you can kind of see them as you go, versus, like you said, turning to your friend after the routine and saying, I thought that was great. I don't know why it got a 9.65.
Yeah. Now, here's another question when you're talking about the routine and the different elements that they have. When the commentators were talking about it, it's like I know that they're gymnasts themselves, so they have to know what they're talking about. But do they get like a sheet saying what's contained within the routine and when it's happening? Because I remember I was listening to it and she's like, oh, and here comes this, or here comes that, here comes the next move. And I'm thinking, I thought they're watching it the first time like we are. So how do they know what the routine entails and what's coming up next if this is new to them like it's new to us?
That's a good question too. The schools each put out a media guide listing the athletes and some information about the athletes. In some of those, they do list the skills that they perform. But I think what was happening with this particular broadcast, as you mentioned, these are two former Minnesota athletes.
Right.
They are familiar with the team because they watch the team a lot. They might go to practices, or they might just go to all the different meets. I think that they know the routines simply because they've watched them many times.
Okay.
In other meets, when you have commentators that aren't as familiar with the athletes, sometimes the commentators come in and watch a practice, or they can watch the warm-ups and get familiar with all of the skills so that they know what's coming.
Oh, okay. That was like, I was trying to figure it out. It's sort of like if we both have worked on Broadway, you continue to do, and I don't. But when you watch a choreographed show, we don't know what the choreography is until we're sitting down in front of it. So that I was trying to figure out how they would know, but you just answered that question. So great.
Yeah. So let's see. To your point about if there's a mistake or if there's a fall and the team has to rally behind them, you're absolutely right that one reason is to sort of keep that momentum and energy up. The other reason is that 6 athletes compete on each piece, and you only have to count 5 scores. So you do have one to play with. So if there's a mistake or a fall, there's still the possibility to drop that score if everybody else hits. So that almost becomes the let's rally around and make sure everyone hits a clean routine after that. So I think that's one thing that the commentators were pointing out. For instance, earlier in the Ohio State lineup, Jenna Hlabach missed a cast handstand. So Lexi Edwards was the next person up. And I think when she hit that really great routine, they said that's the way to come back, recover from that fall, and hopefully the rest of the lineup can hit cleanly.
And who chooses to drop the score? Is that the team, the coach, the judges, or is it just like if there's a drop, or if there's a fall, the judges automatically know to cut that score?
Yeah, you just automatically count your highest 5.
Oh, okay.
So you put up 6, you get to count the highest 5.
Oh, easy.
So for instance, Minnesota on vault, everyone hit a fairly clean vault. The lowest score was 9.775. So they just didn't count that line 775. Whereas Ohio State on the uneven bars, that 9.65 was their 5th score. So they got to count that and drop the 9.25 from the athlete who had the fall.
Oh, got it.
So then in between the rotation break, heading into rotation 2, I don't know if you saw this. They showed the Gopher mascot who was
Oh
out
yeah.
entertaining the crowd. And at one point, he had his tail pulled up and he was playing air guitar on his tail. I thought that was a creative use of mascot costume.
Oh my God, totally. And especially because just watching it on that TV, there's no commercials or anything. So when they were showing the mascot, it was a fun little interlude instead of, playing on my phone or seeing what was going on. It was just fun to see what happens while people are taking a break. It was great. So, and I think, going back to it's a learning experience for all, including myself. It was also fun to see, the cameramen adjust or the commentators. I think at one point, one of the commentators was saying, am I on? Am I on? Like, can you hear me? Oh my gosh, you can hear me. So.
Exactly. That happened right at the beginning of this rotation.
Right.
Apparently, what was happening is the first Ohio State athlete was vaulting, which we didn't get to see. So
Right.
there was silence, and then you heard the announcer say, wait, can you hear me? And then there was silence again, and we weren't seeing anything on the screen. And then they cut over and showed the first uneven bars routine. So the order, of course, is that the first vaulter goes, then the first bars, then they alternate back and forth. So we missed the first vault from Ohio State due to some learning, technical
Right.
difficulties. That crew pulled it together and we didn't miss any more routines after that. So heroes all.
Now here's a question. I could have sworn when we went to go see gymnastics at West Point that sometimes there were simultaneous routines going on, but I didn't notice that here. So is that something that happens during what do you call it? Like these bigger matches with the Big Ten, or is it just kind of depends on each meet on how they do it?
Yeah, it usually depends how many teams are in the meet.
Okay.
So in, for instance, women's college gymnastics, they'll do some meets where there's 3 or 4 teams. They'll all compete at the same time and just move
Okay.
around the events. And when you're watching it in person or on TV, you have to just kind of catch as catch can what you can see. But they've developed this format when there's a dual meet, just the 2 teams, where they will go back and forth, which makes it much more fan friendly and broadcast friendly so that you can actually see each routine that happens.
Oh, right. And then sort of along that, I mentioned the Big Ten earlier. What is the Big Ten? How do you get into the Big Ten? And is there, athlete requirements? Is there sort of physicality, or you said like base elements that they have to hit? Like how does that work?
Good question. Big Ten is kind of unrelated to how good of a gymnast you have to be to get into it. Big Ten is a conference of different schools that originally started as a geographic thing.
Okay.
Now, because of money and broadcast and deals that the NCAA has cut, people have gotten in different conferences for various different reasons. But it started out as a geographic thing. So the Big Ten is Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State and a lot of Midwestern schools. So in terms of how good of an athlete you have to be to get into the program, there are certain, the recruiting is competitive. So these coaches are looking at many times at a lot of the same athletes, and they're trying to attract those athletes to their program. You should come here because we have a championship history. You should come here because our facilities are great. You should come here because our fan base is great. So they're doing a lot to try and attract the athletes to the programs. From the athlete's perspective, there are certain skills and certain routines that you need to be able to do to become attractive to be recruited. On each event, there's sort of a certain base level that they're looking for you to be able to be recruited. But then they're, of course, looking at your GPA. Many times athletes are looking at what are the academic programs. If I want to go into nursing, or if I want to go into science, or if I want to go into literature, they're maybe looking for the school that has an outstanding program in that way.
Nice.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And so then if it started off as a geographical sort of thing, is now the Big Ten sort of like the top 10 schools, or forget about it? It's just called the Big Ten, and that's just what it is. And it's just these schools that happen to be in the same area.
Yeah, it's just schools that happen to be clustered together, basically. The Big Ten happens to have the current national champion. So Michigan won the nationals last year, is currently ranked first in the country. So the Big Ten does currently have the number one team. But the number one team in past has been an SEC team. It's also been a Pac-12 team. It's been a Big 12 team. So there's 4 or 5 major conferences that sponsor women's gymnastics, and they're all pretty competitive within the conference. And the national championship has passed around between the conferences a number of times.
Right. Cool. So bringing it back to Broadway. So not only does Michigan have one of the top musical theater programs, it also has one of the top gymnastics programs.
Absolutely. I wonder how many of the musical theater students go to the meets regularly.
Probably not one.
I bet there's a small crossover of the musical theater students who love gymnastics.
Actually could be, because tumbling is such a big thing in theater world right now. I bet you that they probably, now that you said that, there's probably some crossover of either training in dance class, or, if they have some show, like let's say Bring It On is being done at Michigan, then they'll probably bring in the gymnastics to come over, for the tumbling passes and things like that. So, maybe there is a crossover, and I misspoke.
I would love to see Bring It On at the Michigan theater program with all the athletes in it. That would be fantastic.
We're calling right now. Michigan, if you're listening, we have a great suggestion for you.
Yes. Ohio State moved over to the vault in the second rotation. I thought one of the really outstanding vaulters was Sydney Jennings. She did a Yurchenko full. It was very high and really stuck that landing. In fact, hers got so much height that I wondered if she might be one of the taller athletes. So I looked it up, and she's actually 5'7". So that does put her on the taller side amongst gymnasts. So I think that's why her Yurchenko full looks so impressive, because she's very tall. She flew high. She kept her body open, not much hip angle on the vault. Really nice landing. She scored a 9.85 for that vault. And I thought that was one of the really outstanding vaults for Ohio State.
Yeah. No, I think I do remember that. And she also stuck it without any bounce or hop forward, right?
That's right.
The vaults were fun. Well, I think one of the things I was watching, it's especially just as a casual watcher, is maybe not so much in the person unless they did something that was really spectacular. But I remember specifically for the vault was that it happens so fast.
Mm-hmm.
They just do it. It's like 3 seconds. They go, and then they're done, and then that's it. And so I think that was one of the elements that just really stuck out with me as I'm watching this. Like, wow, all that preparation for 5-7 seconds.
That's right. And sometimes there's an athlete who only vaults during a meet. No. So they travel, they do the warm up, they do all of that for that 3 seconds.
But I think what really shows, though, especially in the vault, and I'm sure it was with Sydney as well, is just how strong and powerful they are. Because that jump into, getting onto the horse and doing all those flips and turns, all of a sudden, you really see just how much power they have, both in their legs and their arms, and just in the way that they support themselves in the core.
Right. Ohio State mostly did the Yurchenko full vaults, which are valued at 9.95. The commentators did mention that Jenna Hlabach did a 10-0 vault. That was one that we unfortunately didn't see. I think there was another camera.
Yeah.
The heroes behind the camera were focusing in a different area at that moment, and we didn't see that one.
Right. If only we had a little bit of replay, we could have seen that.
That's right. I kept thinking, just show the replay. It's okay. Just show the replay. So then over on bars, wow, Minnesota is pretty terrific on the bars.
Yeah.
They mentioned that Tiare Salas had not been in the bars rotation yet this year. I believe she was coming back from an injury. And we got to see her. She went up in the 4th spot. She did an excellent job. She does a really interesting release move. It's the Horkina, where she's flying over the bars, does the half turn and splits her legs and regrasps.
Oh,
And then
yes.
she did the double layout and totally stuck it and got a 9-9.
Right.
Amazing job.
I totally remember that. And I actually think I texted you as soon as she was done, like, oh my gosh, like she was so great.
Yeah.
So I wonder what like the prep is to learn all that stuff and be able to do it so strongly and so cleanly.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know how you even go about learning a skill like that.
So tell me, Kenty, what's that like?
I do know I've been into a gym and I've seen that they have sometimes a set of bars over a pit so that you can train those releases without a hard landing. You can just go into a foam pit. I've also seen where they have the bars separate, where there's just a high bar. So you can learn some of those skills without worrying about that low bar there. So then the back half of the Minnesota lineup, I mean, this is the main note that I made during Minnesota on bars. I thought these back three for Minnesota are awesome. Because starting with Tiare Sales, you had Anna Loper, then Tiare Sales, and then Lexi Ramler, who they said was ranked number 5 on the uneven bars in the nation.
Right.
Did an absolutely beautiful job. Her legs are pasted together the whole time. Her toes are pointed. Very high dismount, totally stuck it. The handstands were all exactly what you want to see. Straight up vertical, hardly a deduction with Lexi Ramler on the bars.
Yeah. And I remember just parts of it and watching her is when she's going from the high bar to the low bar is just how easy she was able to stand up on the low bar, like, like a piece of string and still just stand on it and then jump into the high bar and do all of her elements. It's just really, really impressive. I wish I knew how to do that. I mean, and then if I remember when she stuck it, it's one of those moments when everybody in the crowd just went crazy. I think there was like 3 moments. There was one during the vault, one during the uneven bars, and then once during the floor routine. And if I remember, she also got is it her in the floor routine where she had like an amazing crowd cheer at the very end, right? Was it her or was it Tiara?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Anna Loper's vault was that moment that the crowd really erupted.
Yeah.
I think Lexi Ramler's bars. And then, spoiler alert, I think it's Maya Hooten on floor. When she absolutely drilled those tumbling passes, that's when the crowd really erupted.
Yeah. But those were the parts that are so exciting is when the crowd really gets into it. It's not just the team members in the background, but when the crowd gets into it and you can feel it through the screen, just how exciting the different elements are, or the different routines are.
Now, one difference between this broadcast and, say, an SEC network broadcast, SEC will cut to the commercials. They just show you the hour and a half of the 6 competitive routines. Like you mentioned, this one kept rolling. So we did get to see anytime a team put up an exhibition performer. So Minnesota put up 2 performers at the end of their lineup, Mallory Leneve and Erin Portman, both went up. And an exhibition is when you're not in the top 6, but you're close, and that coaches might want to see you get experience in the competitive setting. You do the routine, the crowd watches, the judges judge you. Your score just doesn't count towards the team score. It's like a practice so that when you are at some point entering the lineup, you're prepared.
Oh, okay. And the judges pick that, or the coaches pick who has the...
Yeah, the coaches get to decide. You don't have to put anyone up at exhibition, but you can opt to put 1 or 2 athletes up and do an exhibition at the end of the lineup.
Oh, nice. I didn't know you could do that. It's like a nice little, here, go have fun. No judgment.
That's right. Get some experience. This may be someone we need to rely on down the line, especially if someone gets sick or hurt and we need that extra athlete. So it's a great way for them to get some experience.
And do they still get scored by the judges just so that they have a mock score?
They do. Yeah. The judges will put up the score. They just don't count toward the team score.
Okay, cool. Nice.
So at this point, this is when you texted and said, Ohio was really kicking butt at this point.
And I was wrong.
No, I was interested to hear, and I think you've explained it, that the height and the dismounts and some of the cleanliness of their landings really led you to think that they were doing a great job at that point. So I thought that was very interesting to hear. This was also the rotation break where Jade came back, star of the broadcast, Jade.
Uh-huh. I underlined her on my notes just because she's my favorite.
So she came back to give a feature about Ohio State on the bars and how successful they had been this season. And do you want to sort of describe how she did?
You know what? I might mess it up. So why don't you describe she did?
It basically defies description.
Wow, what a great job Ohio State did on the uneven bars. This season, the Buckeyes' strongest events have been the uneven bars and beam. With Nicole Riccardi from Ohio on the uneven bars has been the strongest. Oh, I'm so sorry. I messed up completely. Do I go again or do I not?
So shout out to our commentators and our dear friend Jade. You guys did the best you could.
Shout out to the stars. Thank you guys for taking us through an emotional experience of Ohio State at Minneapolis.
We both were at the edge of our seats wondering what's going to happen next, both on the floor and on the screen.
I think it was when Ohio State was on the beam. Emma Pritchard went in the fourth spot, and they kept saying it was Stephanie Berger. And then toward the end of the routine, or maybe when Stephanie was actually about to mount, they said, oh, that actually was Emily Pritchard. Now Stephanie Berger's going to go. I think they had just skipped forward on their list and got a little mixed up.
You know what? But it's so exciting to watch the matches that maybe they were just so excited that they were ready to just keep watching whomever would be next.
They were caught up in the excitement. They couldn't wait to see Stephanie Berger's routine, and they just wanted it to happen one routine sooner.
Exactly. And how did she do? Oh no, this is Stephanie Berger. Oh, Stephanie Berger did pretty well too.
She did. She got a 9.775 on beam. And Emma Pritchard got a 9.825. So both were very strong beam routines.
Yeah.
So kicking off rotation 3, Minnesota was on the beam and Ohio State was on the floor. I know that some of the Ohio State choreography really stood out to you. So maybe we'll start there.
Oh, yeah. There was one girl that did all the movie mashup. She was so into it. Who was the girl that did the movie mashup?
That was Claire Gagliardi.
Claire Gagliardi. And let's see.
And I had heard about this routine. It starts with the dun 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 dun, like the movie opening sound, and then it goes into the lightsaber from Star Wars, and then it goes into Jaws, where she makes the fin and she's swimming away to get away from Jaws, and then it wraps up with Footloose, where she's dancing and she's the outlaw.
I like this floor music.
I do too. So fun. Beautiful first pass, and she danced out of it, and I love when coaches encourage that. It's so fun.
And it helps cover up any sort of landing deductions if you might have one.
Smart coaching right there.
Little homage to Star Wars.
I love this. This is a fun routine. A little Jaws action here, getting the crowd into it.
That's great.
That was a cool little roll.
Finishing it off here with some Footloose. heading into her last pass, the double pike,
Huge double pike.
great landing.
What a fun routine. I love that.
Her personality came out so much through that.
She was totally committed 100%. And
Yes, she
I
was.
had a smile pasted on my face the whole time. I thought it was so fun.
Oh my gosh, me too. I was watching it, and then it's funny that you say that she was so committed, because when she did her routine, she was such a standout. Everybody was watching, everybody was into it. The music was fun. She was dancing, she was doing her tumbling passes. And I know that the choreography in between the tumbling passes is just to get from one corner to the next. But the difference between Claire and I think a lot of the other people was, even in those passing moments to get to the next corner of the mat, she was arms extended, full energy through the fingers, like out into the audience or into the crowd. And that was such a difference that it's no surprise that she scored a 9875.
Yeah, totally agree. I actually thought the first three from Ohio State, it was an interesting lineup, and I can see why Ohio State's ranked so high on the floor. Their first three have really interesting, unusual choreography, and all three seem pretty committed to it. Like it's really, they're performing all out. And then the final three have great tumbling, great leaps. They do a nice job, but they don't quite have that same choreography commitment that we noticed in the first three.
Right.
And you raise an interesting point, because there's been a debate in the sport of gymnastics about what is artistry. Is artistry someone who dances well? Is artistry someone who has ballet training? Or like you said, that extension of the line, the hyperextension of the leg? But recently the conversation has been that artistry in gymnastics is really this commitment, passion. You know, you're connected to the music, but you're committed and you're all in on the dancing. And that's what I found so compelling about those first three Ohio State performers, as I thought they had that absolute commitment. It might have been weird music and weird movements, unusual, you know, the movie theme. I just thought it was fun to watch because they were so into it.
Yeah. No, and you can tell. Just, I think it's sort of, you know, when you get a routine or choreography that just speaks to you and you know you love it, that it's fun for them, which makes it more fun for us to watch. And sort of speaking about what is artistry and is it commitment, is I'm really curious, when these floor mats or these floor routines are choreographed, are they choreographed to the beat? Because that's, you know, me coming from a theater background, I was counting and watching. And, you know, the tumbling passes, you can't always hit it on the beat because it's with momentum. It has nothing to do with rhythm. But watching their passing movements into their tumbling passes, I was like, wait a second, where's the rhythm? Where's the beat? Or is that just something that we don't think about in gymnastics?
Yeah, that should be part of the choreography. That the intention is that that's part of the choreography. So whether that athlete was a little bit off, or that athlete isn't feeling the music and the choreography as strongly as somebody else. That's the other thing I've found about gymnastics, is obviously you have various different physical types of gymnasts, and you also have various different emotional types of gymnasts, right? Some might be more reserved. It might not be natural for them to show huge expression and huge commitment to dance. You know, I think on both teams, we saw people who were much more comfortable dancing and emoting and showing their passion, and some who seemed like they were doing what was required, but not going all the way to the extreme. And that's that gymnast's personality too. And I think they can be evaluated. They can both be evaluated together in the same meet. I think that the person over here should get some points for that commitment and that artistry and that passion.
Oh, yeah.
And I think other athletes who excel in other areas can earn their points, you know, that way too.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I just, after seeing Claire and that super fun routine, and there was another one that stuck out. Was it Alexis?
Well, the first two, right before Claire, Savannah Gonzalez started the rotation, and then JoJo Warga was right after her. And Gonzalez, Warga, and Gagliardi. I thought those were sort of the 1, 2, 3 punch of commitment, passion, exuberant dancing.
Yeah. They're great.
Yeah.
And so once you get to like the next level, right? So you're talking about elite and what is it, all-star you said? No, junior Olympic.
Junior Olympic, yeah.
So does that sort of marry the two different types of like you said, like there's the two, right? There's the artistry, commitment, excitement, but there's also like the technical and the skill level. When you get to the next level, are you supposed to marry the two? Or is it still kind of, they're all judged within the same bucket, but depending on where their skill level lies?
Yeah, it's a great question. You'll see people in the level system, the JO level system, who are very committed and passionate and artistic, and then some who are less comfortable in dancing. And you see the same thing in elite as well. It's really, you're supposed to show artistry and commitment and passion in the dancing.
Yeah.
It just isn't in some athletes to do that as big and as boldly as others.
Right.
And the Olympic judges don't tend to take points off for that. You see in the Olympics, you'll see some routines that are very emotional and exuberant, and they've really connected with the music and they're dancing passionately. And then you see some who just are not as skilled at doing that, and they can all still get a decent score. It's one thing that some critics have called out, that we need a better way of requiring that attention to detail on the artistry. How can you really codify that? How can a judge require that?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Cool.
It's a question, because what's artistic to one judge might be different to another. What's artistic when it's a home team at the end of an exciting meet and the crowd's cheering and the judges get all caught up in the excitement? It just becomes more difficult to differentiate between those things.
Yeah. Cool.
But
it's funny.
Cheers to Ohio State for really investing in interesting choreography and performing it so well.
Absolutely. That was, I think, I always know that I like floor just because I love watching tumbling passes, but I think Ohio State took the cake on it, which again.
So also in rotation 3, Minnesota was over on the beam.
Right.
I don't think I had seen Emily Cook do beam before. She led off for them, and she has very long, pretty lines, very nice dance. Her tumbling was smooth. I thought she did an excellent job. She ended with a round off 1.5 dismount and a little hop, started them off with a 9.775, but that really led off what was going to end up being a very nice rotation. Minnesota ended up with a 49.15 on the beam. They did have one break during the rotation. Their 5th athlete fell, unfortunately. Right. She did the back handspring layout. It was a little off to the side and she fell. But then you had Lexi Ramler up in the 6th spot. So again, you're talking about, we got to have 5 great scores. We have 4. And now we have Lexi Ramler coming up. And, what a star she is.
That she started that way. And then every time she landed, there wasn't a wobble. There wasn't, sort of a second guess of where she was. Oh, and I think they also said that she was doing a lot of stuff on the beam where she wasn't keeping sight on the bar as well. Which I didn't realize was also a thing, that taking your eyes off the bar is a skill that you have to learn. So watching her, I remember I think she did 2 tumbling passes where she wasn't keeping her eye or face, or she was rotating in the air as she was going.
Yeah, I think what the commentators were talking about is the leap where she threw her head back. So a ring leap, and she does it beautifully. It's where your legs are extended, your back leg is bent, and you throw your head back so you're looking up at the ceiling. So to do that and then land back on the beam, it just has a higher difficulty level than some of the leaps where you can keep your eyes on the beam the whole time. And she did those extremely well, not a wobble. And the mount that you're talking about, I know what you mean. There's a mount called a candle mount where you jump backward and you have to catch yourself where then your legs are straight up in the air. And 3 of the Minnesota athletes did that mount. 2 of the exhibition athletes did it, and Ali Sonier did it. They were not as controlled as you like to see. You like to see them land and hit that vertical position and then lower down onto the beam. And all 3 of those seemed a little bit over, like it wasn't totally controlled. But that is an interesting mount to see.
Yeah. So are there different types of mounts, or is that like, but we only saw that one in this meet, right? There's the one where you just get on the bar, and then there's
right. Some just will, jump up onto the beam or throw a leg over and do the split. Some will jump up to the beam from the springboard at the end. The other mount that was really interesting, when we get to Ohio State on the beam, there was a press handstand mount from Hannah Oliveros from Ohio State. She did where she puts her hands on the beam and then she presses all the way up to a handstand. And I thought that was a very impressive mount as well.
I'm watching it on on YouTube right now, because I was like, which one is it? You're right. We did see that once, and I don't know why. I thought it was just, maybe it's because I saw the candlestick, you call it, right? Saw the candlestick several times that I completely forgot. So sorry to, who did the press handstand?
Hannah Oliveros from Ohio State.
Apologies to Hannah. Oh, I remember her. Hannah was also super impressive too. She had a lot. She's strong. She's very, very strong.
She did a great job. She unfortunately had a fall on her side aerial to back handspring, but she did look really impressive on the beam. That press handstand was nice. Her dismount was very good.
Yeah.
So then wrapping up Minnesota on the beam, Lexi did, of course, an excellent job.
Right.
Got a 9.975. The Minnesota finished the beam with a 49.15. Ohio State finished the floor with a 49.225. That was Ohio State's highest event score of the night, was their very impressive floor exercise. And then that set us up for rotation 4. Jade, our star of the telecast, came back and did a feature on Maya Hooten to set the audience up for the floor exercise that we were about to see.
Maya Hooten, a sophomore for the Gophers who had an amazing freshman debut last season, is coming back for more. Hooten recorded a second career perfect 10 on floor against Michigan with her meaningful and inspirational routine. It's the final rotation of the day. Jenny and Caitlin, if you were competing, what would be going through your mind?
They didn't show Jade at this point, so I wondered if maybe this was pre-recorded.
Oh, okay.
But just as a little bit of background, Maya had pulled out of their last meet after the warm-ups. And I think a lot of people were concerned that maybe she was hurt or maybe she wasn't feeling great. So it was really nice to see that Maya was back in this meet. They showed a little bit of the warm-ups. She warmed up her full in and it looked really good. So big sigh of relief. Maya's okay. We're going to see Maya.
I wonder if she got the yips, maybe, like once you start doing it and then you feel like you can't, or maybe there was just something pulled or that she felt her body was right.
Interesting. Very timely reference to the yips.
Yes.
Although they do say that usually takes several weeks or maybe even several months to get over that, or it can take that long. So I'm thinking it probably wasn't that, but maybe it was just something minor. She landed and didn't feel totally right. And she thought it's probably best for me not to compete tonight.
Yeah.
There have unfortunately been a number of Achilles tendon injuries in NCAA this season. There's been maybe 8 or 10 athletes who have had their season ended with an Achilles tendon injury. So I think anytime we gym fans see that someone's not feeling great or they need to not compete on floor, there's always a concern about their health. So it was nice to see Maya back. She looked great. Heading into rotation 4, the commentators also said that Geraldine Stack Eaton was one of the choreographers of Maya's routine. And Geraldine Stack Eaton is one of the assistant coaches at Minnesota. And she is a former standout athlete from the University of Alabama, my alma mater. So roll tide and go, Geraldine. Nice job on that floor exercise routine.
Right. And which one, remind me, what was the music that she did on her routine? Do you remember?
Oh, it's set to music from Beyonce's Homecoming.
So when we were watching her, and I think it was mostly Minnesota, and going back to talking about Achilles injuries, a lot of them had that padded mat at the corners when they were finishing the top. So I'm assuming that's why, or I mean, you know more than me, but I'm assuming that that's why they have those padded mats in the end, so that they don't stick the landing so hard, and I'm assuming snap their
That's right. That gives them a little bit of extra padding for those tumbling passes. And I think, like the announcer said, it's totally fine to do. There's no deduction for that. And many of them, you'll see, they choose to have that extra pad there just to soften some of those landings.
Yeah. And is that something that's showing up a lot more recently, that especially with people being more conscious about their bodies, or is that like
I've seen that for years. They do that.
Oh.
They I don't think the commentators always pointed it out. They point it out more now. But
Yeah.
I remember even back in my day in the 90s, they would slide in a mat if someone needed a little bit of extra cushion on a landing.
Right. And do the listeners know about your gymnastics background? Do you have you done any gymnastics in your past? You talked about your watching in the 90s, so I'm like, well, let's hear about your gymnastics.
I don't know if the listeners do know. I did take a gymnastics class when I was 4 at the local Y, but that's as far as my actual gymnastics career went. But I attended the University of Alabama, and I got hooked on going to the gymnastics meets and really following the sport then.
Yeah.
And have just been a gymnastics fan since then.
Oh, nice. So you learned, you learned at 4, and then you relearned again when you got to college.
There you go. I don't know that I knew what a lot of the skills were at 4. I liked jumping on the trampoline, and I remember they would hold your hand and let you walk down the balance beam. That's the one thing that I remember from gymnastics at 4.
So that's where you learned your first Ujenko full, and that's
there you go.
You're going to show it on your YouTube channel following this episode.
I'm not sure the Yurchenko had been invented at that point, but we'll go with yes. So over to Ohio State on the beam. Like we mentioned, Oliveros started with that lovely press handstand. And unfortunately, she had a break, and that was in the 3 spot. So they needed those final 3 athletes to hit to count a great score on the balance beam. And they all did. So Pritchard, Berger, and Jennings were the final 3. They all went up and did a really nice job. I thought Berger showed really good split on her jumps. She seemed really powerful. She did nice acrobatics, nice jumps. She did the cartwheel gainer full off the side, which we didn't see a lot of dismounts like that in this competition. So that really stood out to me. Were there any others that stood out to you on the balance beam?
No, I do remember, though. I think, was it on this one? There was a few people that had the step out at the end instead of, they did the dismount, right? Was it Ohio State that had a lot of the steps out? So I remember the commentators were talking about saying, that depending on if you step forward, if you step back, if it's a hop, or if it's a step to the side, that affects how they score. And I noticed with Ohio State that there was 3 that had a step out at the end of the routine.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So if you're doing a backward flip and you then have to take a step back, that means you've overdone it. You had more than enough power, and they just deduct for that step. If you land short and you have to then take a step forward, there can be an additional deduction because you're losing a 1/10 for the step, but they can also deduct for the fact that you didn't totally complete the skill. You landed short of the skill. And then I think the commentators were also pointing out at another point in the meet that if there's a step to the side, it not only means that the landing wasn't totally under control, but that also you weren't landing in the proper position. You were, out of position, and you had to take a step, and it was step to the side. So that's really when you're looking at multiple deductions versus, for instance, with Ohio State on the beam, Alexis Hankins in the second position did that excellent dismount where she did the round off double twist.
Yes.
Very nice. Just a little scoot back. And that's the kind of dismount where they only deducted for just that little scoot back, but it was well completed, well in line, versus if she had been short or if she had taken a step to the side, that would be additional deductions.
Right. And the commentators were also saying like just a slight hop or just a slight, so even the level of hop is a deduction. So if it's like a tiny little hop, you get a deduction. But if it's a big hop, it's going to be a bigger deduction.
That's right. So the smallest deduction that the judges can take is 0.5 tenth. And so a step, a very small step is going to be 0.5 tenth. And then generally a larger step, I think they mentioned at one point, if it's shoulder width or more, that's going to be 1/10 of a point. And then of course, say on the floor, if you take 2 bounding steps out of a tumbling pass or you're really out of control, they might take 1/10 of a point for each step. But right, on the beam, little step, probably 0.5 tenth, bigger step, probably 1/10.
Right. And I think I remember when I was watching the floor routine that they were saying after every tumbling pass, you're allowed or you're given 1 step back. But there was one star where every time she did a tumbling pass, she just stuck it and then she kept going. She never once took a step back out of her took a step out of her tumbling pass. Do you remember who that was?
Yes. So Maya Hooten did an excellent job. She has 3 tumbling passes and she 2-foot stuck all 3 of them. Yeah. So tucked full in, the front full front pike, and then the double tuck. She landed all 3 of them, didn't move either foot. But you're right, you are allowed on the floor exercise a controlled lunge. That's where you land with both feet. One can step back so that you can present, they raise their arms and they sort of make it a gesture of presentation. And when you do that, you're supposed to keep that front foot planted. So the one that landed can't move. So if you take the step back and you kind of slide back and take some more steps, then they'd start deducting for that because you're out of control. But you're supposed to show control either in that controlled lunge or like Maya Hooten did, she just didn't move any feet. She stuck, didn't move a single foot.
And I think what the commentators were talking about too, one is I remember because it was so impressive that she just like did it. And that was that. Like there wasn't even a breath afterwards. She just stuck in and she's like, all right, I'm good. I'm moving on. It was great. But the judges were also talking about that sometimes that lunge back isn't quite enough, that the choreographers will hide the adjustment in the choreography. So hoping that the judges might not see that there's an extra step or an extra wobble that's in there because they've done well enough to hide it into the next dance move.
That's right. And I think that for athletes who've come from the elite program, in the elite program, you are supposed to stick every tumbling pass without any controlled lunges at all. So that's one of the big differences moving to college is that you can take the controlled lunge. And for some of the athletes who've competed elite, it's having to relearn that it's okay to take the controlled lunge. But like you said, the coaches want them to do that because that can help you control those tumbling passes and not get deductions. Yeah. And then also to your point, they do many times try and work in ways to disguise if you're slightly out of control. Sometimes there's a leap added after landing a tumbling pass. You land and then go into a leap, or you land and immediately go into some choreography, just so that it's not as obvious that you landed the tumbling pass out of control. Yeah.
Cool. Well, it's definitely apparent. And, the difference between everybody except Maya. Maya was the only one, if I remember, is that I almost prefer them, which I know is elitist of me to say, but the elite version that Maya did, because it just is so impressive watching her. And, and then you start to hear the crowd. And the first, she stuck it, the crowd goes wild. The second, they go even bigger. Then the third, when she's done and it's the end of the routine, I actually think, if I remember her correctly, she did the third tumbling pass. I thought she was done, but she had just a little bit more choreography to go. And she ended on the floor with a leg tucked in, another leg extended. And that's when everybody went crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree. For the health of the athletes, I know that the controlled lunge is supposed to be more forgiving on the legs. And obviously they're competing a lot. And they're, 4 years, we want to keep the athletes healthy. So go for the controlled lunge. Some of the athletes make the controlled lunge look so beautiful. But I completely agree. When someone goes up and does what Maya did and lands all three without moving the foot at all, it is so impressive and exciting. It gets you riled up. You want to put on one of those Minnesota sweatshirts and start screaming.
Exactly. I actually just ordered mine right now.
Good. Order me one. Order me some gloves.
Perfect. All right. You'll get the gloves and I'll get the sweatshirt, and then we can both have our sweatshirts for the next episode.
Perfect. So a couple of other standouts on Minneapolis's floor. Maddie Quarles, they mentioned this was only the second time competing floor in her entire career. She went up in the second spot. She did an excellent job and she got a 9.95. I thought that was so impressive that she obviously has continued training floor, but hasn't been in the lineup and hasn't competed, and has come out now when her team needs her and is doing these excellent floor routines.
Right. And I think I remember our good friends, the commentators, talking about it, saying it's her first time. Let's see how she does. We don't quite know what to expect. And she just knocked it out of the park as well. I don't quite remember her choreography. I just remember the commentators talking about how, it's her first time, that she's really doing well. It's a near perfect routine that, and what a great way for Maddie to shine, especially in her first time on the floor, in a competitive way. Meaning like her first time being judged and not just, what did you call it, an exhibition? It's just,
right.
Actually being there for the team. And did they say why she was able to start competing, or was there a reason, or it was just that, she got a great score. So I'm assuming that they're like, you're ready, go for it. Let's see what you can do.
I don't actually know why she's now made it into the lineups. I assume she's just continued working, and they do inner squads and practice. They line everybody up and compete as close as they can to simulate a competition environment to determine who the lineups are going to be. And my guess is she's just continued working and worked her way up into the top 6.
Oh, cool. Good for her.
Yeah. She looked great. And of course.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you.
Oh, so then do all the athletes on the team train for each routine, or do they train specifically for something and then maybe there's one or two alternates?
So when they get to college, some athletes stop training certain events. They might not train bars anymore, for instance. They might only train the other 3. Or some might even get to a point where they just train one event. It's really, you hear through these interviews with the athletes that sometimes they get to a point where maybe they've had shoulder injuries, so they can't do bars anymore, or they've had ankle injuries, so they don't do floor anymore. So you do hear about some who continue to train all around and some who only train certain events.
Okay.
And beyond the 6 that you see on the competition floor, many times coaches say that they've got as many as 10 or 12 training each event. So they may have 12 athletes who currently do beam routines. You're going to see the best 6 in the meet, but they're going to know that if someone can't go or someone gets sick, they have these backups who have been training those events.
Oh, cool. That makes sense.
This was actually a big learning curve for me when I started following college, because at the Olympics, for instance, at that time, you sent your 6 athletes from the USA, and all 6 competed all the events. And then I got to college and I would see that, oh, this one athlete's over here on the vault, but then they don't compete on the bars. And we don't just have a team of 6, we have a team of 12 or 15, and certain athletes only go on certain events. So I think it's the benefit of having a team that's maybe 12 or 15 or 20 deep, and you have to put up your best 6.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that makes sense because you can't be good at everything.
Unless you're Lexi Ramler, in which case you're just good at everything.
Exactly. She's the star. Or Jade.
Jade. Jade. So unfortunately, I think that you might have turned the meat off when it was over. I left it on for a few minutes, and Jade made a third appearance.
No, I missed Jade and her final and most important appearance.
So Jade came back, we saw her, and she interviewed Anna Loper.
Oh.
So at the end of the meet, she came back and she talked to Anna Loper about Anna had scored a 10 on vault the week before, and now she had come back and scored a 9975 this week. So Jade did a fabulous job of asking Anna about that, and Anna got to talk about how much fun it was performing at home in front of the enthusiastic crowd. So our final championship appearance by Jade, she did a great job. She stuck the dismount.
Oh, good for her. It's always, you can start off a little bit rocky. As long as you stick to dismount and you do great, and you're good. So shout out to Jade.
Shout out to Jade. Shout out to the camera operators who also missed their mount, but
Right.
stuck their dismount.
But stuck it at, you know what? As long as you stick it at the end, that's all you need.
That's all you need.
But yeah, it was really an enjoyable meet, and I definitely, as a casual watcher, I enjoyed so much of it. I didn't think it was going to go as fast as it did, just because it was so enjoyable. All of a sudden, I realized, like, oh my god, it's 7:00, and I had no idea because it was fun. But from the athletes to the commentators to the cameramen to Jade to texting my dear friend Kenty, the entire experience was so much fun.
We had a lot of breakout stars of the meet.
We did. The biggest one being double back with Kenty.
Aw, thanks. Who are your favorite athletes from each team?
I think let's go with what do you call it? Minnesota first. I think my favorite would be, Anna for mostly because she was just fun to watch everything doing. And then for Ohio State, let's go back to the floor routine. Claire was my favorite. For
Claire
Ohio State.
Gagliardi from Ohio State. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that floor routine, I had heard about that floor routine, but I had never seen it. So it was very exciting for me to get to see that one too. I agree. I loved her.
Yeah.
Other standouts, of course, Lexi Ramler from Minnesota. She's fantastic. I loved watching her. And then I'll also give a shout out to the outstanding bars routines from Ohio State, Stephanie Berger and Colby Miller, Nicole Riccardi. They did a really nice job over there. In terms of a final score wrap up, Minnesota finished with a 197.575.
Right.
Ohio State ended with a 195.775. In terms of where this puts these teams, Minnesota is really shooting for the national championships. They want to be at least top 8 by the end of the season. And a score like 197.575 puts them right on track for that. This is exactly the kind of showing that they need to give for the rest of the season. Ohio State is going to be hoping to make it to the second day of regionals to be top 16 in the country. Yeah. What are you laughing about?
Because they're just hoping.
Well, no, I mean,
yeah.
Each team has their realistic goals, right? I think they want to go as far as they can. But Ohio State made second day of regionals last season, made it to the top 16. I think they would hope to get back to that Sweet 16 this year. They're going to need to start scoring higher than a 195.775. They're going to need to clean up some of these steps, some of these errors, eliminate the major breaks from these routines, and start putting up mid 196s at least for the rest of the season. So just in terms of a trajectory, that's where each of these teams is right now. So
I guess, is a 1.8 score difference, is that large? Is that small? Like how close are the meets normally? It's a meet, right? Yeah. How close are the meets normally in score?
It's funny, when Mike was on a few weeks ago, the meet difference was 3 points. And like you pointed out, this was just a little bit under 2 points. And he asked the same question.
Yeah.
And I guess there's two different answers. Yeah, a meet that's separated by about 2 points is a pretty big separation. The other thing to look at is we were watching a meet between number 22, Ohio State, and number 6, Minnesota. So we knew coming in that the rankings are pretty different. We talked about the Big Ten, each team within the Big Ten has to meet all the other Big Ten teams throughout the season. So they're required to do these meets within their conference. So you're going to have some where they're very, very close and they might just come down to a few tenths. And then you're going to have some like this where I think we knew the outcome coming in is that if Minnesota did what they were capable of, they probably would win the meet. And making the next step of getting to the national championships is based on your average score. So for most of these teams, it isn't so much about the win or the loss. It's about, can I get my team score to a point that's going to qualify me to the next step?
Oh, yeah. Got it.
So I would say, yes,
State.
2 points is a pretty big difference. We've seen some meets that came down to just a couple of tenths, a portion of a tenth. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what happened? Is it, I'm assuming there's a tie, or because there's so many tenths that probably not.
There could be a tie. We rarely see ties. There was a meet recently where it was separated by a quarter of a tenth, and an inquiry was put in on a routine, and the score was raised. So it then flipped it to the other team, ended up winning the meet by a very, very small margin.
Wow. And so what would an inquiry be in that sort of situation? Like, why would a judge feel so compelled to flip it? I mean, especially if it's that close.
Yeah, you can only inquire about the D score, so the difficulty score. So if a routine was given a 9.9 start value, and it really should have been a 10 because the judge misevaluated a skill, the coach can put in an inquiry and say, I'd like you to review that. They can go to a video review where the judges get together and discuss, I saw this skill and this skill and this skill. And if they determine that the start value really was higher, then they'll raise the start value.
Oh, and I guess that makes sense because you're watching in the moment, so you can only catch what you see. But if you get the playback, you get the double back, you get to watch it again.
Nice way to bring it back around.
You know, I think that's going to be a sound cue that every time someone brings it back around, you have a little double back that comes in.
They'll double back and reevaluate that routine.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for watching the meet with me. Thank you for coming on the podcast to talk about it. If people wanted to reach out to you and discuss how much they also loved Maya Hooten's 2-foot sticks on her floor routine, how can they reach you?
Yeah, people can find me at Steve Cesaro Medina on Facebook and S Cesaro Medina on Instagram. Great.
And again, if they want to listen to your podcast that you co-host, where can they find that?
And that is the Adam Sank Show, anywhere you listen to your podcast. So we are live on Saturdays at 11 a.m. EST. Thanks for having me. This has been so much fun, Kenty. I've really enjoyed watching it. I've enjoyed learning all the stuff and asking all the questions. And I can't wait to be back on again.
Yeah. So will you come back again and talk about another meet sometime?
Well, now that I've self-invited myself and you've extended it, I would absolutely love to watch another meet. This has been so fun.
I'm relieved to hear that. Good.
Yeah. It went so fast that I didn't think it would happen, that I would watch a 2-hour meet thinking it was only 5 minutes long. So it was really just enjoyable. So thanks for teaching me and having me on.
You've got it. You got it. And thank you, the listeners, for sticking with us. We'd love to hear from you. What would you like to hear us discuss next week? You can reach out to me on Twitter at KentyMac or email at kentymac@gmail.com. Please subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you all for listening and see you next week. Stay safe and enjoy gymnastics.
Bye, everybody.
Subscribe on YouTube.
Bye, everybody.
Double back with Kenty Mac.